This episode of The Unstarving Musician is powered by liner notes. Learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry professionals I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician on topics such as marketing, songwriting, touring, sync licensing, and much more. Sign up for liner notes at unstarvingmusician.com. It's an email newsletter from yours truly in which I share some of the best knowledge gems garnered from the many conversations featured on The Unstarving Musician. You'll also be privy to the latest podcast episodes and liner notes subscriber exclusives. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. This is The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabonzo. This is my podcast. It features conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals. It's all intended to help independent music artists better understand the marketing, business, and creative processes that empower us to do more of what we love. Wait for it, make music. Thank you for being here. It is a pleasure, as always, to be in your earbuds or on your car speakers today on your Sonos, wherever the heck you listen to The Unstarving Musician and your other favorite podcasts. Maybe do it on Alexa. Did you know you can do that? Yeah, I did all the training or whatever. Gave her the skills to let her know about my podcast. So you can hear me on Alexa if you have one of those creepy devices in your house. Wow, so I had some home drama that I was going to share with you, and I'm still going to share with you. But right before I started recording, I thought, I'm in the studio. It has a bathroom. I'm going to go take a leak. I open up the toilet, and there's this gymongous lizard in there. It looks like one of these, we used to call them horny toads in Texas. I don't know what the scientific name is. And they disappeared for many years, but I think they've made a comeback. It's sort of like a lizard with a triangular-shaped head and like a roundish, it looks like it's like an overweight lizard. Anyway, I got him out of the toilet safely, got him out of the studio safely. I don't know how he got in here. I imagine those things can kind of squeeze through cracks. I wouldn't say the doors are airtight here, but yeah, what I was gonna say before that, I was gonna start off with, did you sign up for Threads, that new thing by Meta, that thing that's connected to Instagram? I did. I was like, oh man, I mean, I definitely like trying these things out for marketing and just, sharing shit. But yeah, so I signed up. It was sheer FOMO that had me sign up today, but I swear I feel like an early adopter. Today's like the 6th, July 6th, as I record the intro for this episode, which comes out tomorrow, the 7th, or today, right now, if you're listening to my voice. But, okay, so I'm there at Rabonzo Drummer, just like I am on the Instagram, on the Twitter, on the Facebook, and other places on the Facebook, because Facebook has lots of places. But yeah, I'm there, and I started threading, or whatever they call it there. Sewing, I'm stitching, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But yeah, so what I was going to start with outside of Threads is earlier this week, last week I guess, I was like overwhelmed with this feeling that everything in my house was breaking at once. I still feel like it's more things are coming, but the short version is there was a coffee grinder crisis, and if you know me at all, it's a crisis. I love coffee. I had 2 separate plumbing issues, one involving a crappy installation and a broken PVC pipe, one of those push-down drain plugs that got hard stuck, and then electrical stuff in another bathroom, which was also affected by a hard-to-find light lamp bulb thing, and also some floor lighting electrical issues. But, okay, so I called some guys. 2 guys came and fixed the plumbing, the crappy installation plumbing, and the electrical stuff for me. I'm giving you the short version, I really am. So that was great. And God bless YouTube. I'm not religious, but God bless YouTube for helping me get this stupid push-down sink plug out of the drain of my bathroom sink. That sounds so stupid, but it was stuck hard anyway. And for the guys who showed me how to take apart my coffee grinder, I should have the model here. Should share it with you. In fact, let me see. I'm gonna, because it's a piece of crap, let me tell you. The guy in the YouTube video told me so. I don't think I've had it. Maybe I've had it 3 years, maybe 5. I don't know. It's a Cuisinart DBM 8 burr grinder. Don't buy one. It yeah, it apparently just gets coffee stuff stuck in the motor grinder burr thingy, and I got it apart and fixed it. I can tell it's hard to clean. I didn't go so far as that you could take it apart more than I did, and I took this thing apart. But yeah, it's a tough cleaning job. I'm sure there's stuff hiding from me. Anyway, it's working. I have coffee. Everything's okay. Yeah, it's good. Deep breath. Everything's fixed. Other than that, I have plans to record music for record a couple songs for my YouTube channel at Robanzo, my artist channel. That's happening next week. Rehearsing for that. If all goes well, I'll have something published in about 10 days. It's one of these live, doing a live vocal, like a one-take vocal performance. It's not going to be a live stream, but it's basically going to be a live take. But I'll run the sound through my sound gear, not to do much to my voice. I really don't try to do too much with that. It is what it is. But one thing I'm learning is to stop trying to cover songs that I have to work so hard on to reach higher sustained notes. The life of an untrained singer, that's me. Hopefully I'll get it down one of these days so that when I hear a singer I truly admire, I'll no longer have thoughts like, I'll never be that good, or God, I'm such a B-grade singer, or oh man, I suck at singing. Do you ever do that to yourself? Is it just me? Come on, some of you do that to yourself, right? Anyway, I know I'm okay at it, but I want to be better. My guest is quite a good musician, Christine Smith. She's a classically trained pianist who has had a varied musical career. She's done composition, film score, cover bands, teaching, and anything else you can think of doing as a good piano player / musician. And she co-founded the entertainment and informational content development company called Frosted Lens. Before that, Christine was the sound and music director-composer in residence for RPR Studios. Her work has been heard in award-winning films, commercials, and promotional videos. She's the host of a podcast called Musicians versus the World, an interview format podcast that explores the many aspects of musician life. I encourage you to check that out wherever you get your podcasts. We talk about the podcast, her podcast, and also her paid gigs as a teen and through college, creative audio-visual projects of Frosted Lens, her media company, composing and orchestration. We also talk about a short film she was involved in called Broken Lillies, which I am gonna watch. You can stream it from her website, which I'm going to give you here. And we also chat about the arc of her career in music, film, audio production, and more. Okay, so find all things Christine Smith, including that short film, Broken Lillies, and all the stuff about Frosted Lens and the Musicians Against the World podcast at frostedlens.com. Here is me talking with Christine Smith. Okay, you're in Atlanta, right?
Yes.
I don't recall if I asked you this last time we spoke, but are you from there?
I'm not. I'm actually from upstate New York, and we've moved around. Well, I'll take that back. I was born in California, near San Jose, actually. And then we moved to New York when I was a kid, when I was about 13. And so I say I'm from New York, but I guess I'm kind of from a bunch of different places. But now we're down in Atlanta.
Where near San Jose were you when you were a kid?
So I was born in Mountain View.
Okay.
But then I grew up in Vallejo.
Vallejo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I grew up going to Marine World and Mare Island, all of that, Angel Island, all of that fun stuff.
Oh, nice. My wife Sammy and I were there as part of an anniversary excursion, and I was commenting like, I don't remember. We lived in that area for like 17 years, and I was telling her I don't recall if we ever went to Angel Island or not.
No?
Wait, no, I'm thinking. Wait, Treasure Island's the one that's right there, right? Like sort of, or are they both right there in the South Bay Area?
I think they're both right there.
I'm sorry. I guess I should say the Greater Bay Area.
No, they're right there. Angel Island was the one that we went for all of the, like the school field trips and things. So I don't remember going to Treasure Island either, to be honest.
Yeah, we may have once, but I certainly don't remember going to Angel Island. But
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then formative years in upstate New York.
Uh-huh. Yep. Up by Albany. It's great. It's beautiful. I love it up there so much, especially this time of year.
The seasons, right?
Uh-huh. The seasons. The only months I don't like it are between January and March. I could I could be happy never going up there during January and March, but everywhere else, it's totally great. It's just
Horrible weather, I take it,
yeah,
during
just
that time.
cold, 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 cold. Then I'm really, really happy to be in Atlanta.
When did your musical endeavors begin?
Um,
The very beginning.
oh, you want to go way back? Well, I will say when I was like 2 years old, our church choir director decided that there were not enough members of her church choir. And so she decided she needed to start early. And so she started a little mommy and me music class in the church on Wednesdays. And she ended up being my piano teacher when I was 6. And my brothers all took lessons, and I was the one that stuck with it. And then when we moved to New York, I ended up getting my serious teacher, the Russian School of Music type of music teacher from Ukraine. And yeah, so then I just jumped in with both feet. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So
And that was
yeah,
piano?
it was piano. Yep,
Wow.
yep. So I am a pianist, and I still consider myself a pianist all these years later. It's kind of funny how you kind of wrap your whole identity around it. My first job was as a pianist too. I ended up being a choir accompanist when I was like 14, 15, something along those lines. And then I started accompanying a bunch of people, and they would pay me really well to do that. And I thought, oh my goodness, there's money in playing piano. This is incredible. And so, yeah, I got hooked on that. And then I would play for weddings, and I would play for parties and all sorts of things. Yeah, it was just so much fun. And I ended up accompanying a bunch of choirs and playing in little ensembles. And that kept on going through college. And because of my experience in playing church music, I was able to, during college, make some good money being a church musician while I was studying piano in college. So,
Wow.
yeah, tons of ways to make money as a pianist. There's pretty much whatever you can think of.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so I would go and play with different garage bands on Saturday night, and then go play for church services on Sundays.
Not hungover, probably, because that's
No,
hard.
no, no, no. I wouldn't drink. It's very hard to play the piano well if you don't have all of your wits about you. So,
Especially on Sunday morning for
right.
a church crowd.
Exactly, exactly.
Wow.
So,
So you're gigging, making money before you're even 20.
mhm,
Wow,
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, it was really fun. And yeah, it was great. And it really helped out during in college because again, accompanying, everyone needs an accompanist, especially if you're in a college town, and especially if you're in the School of Music. Everybody has juries at the end of their semester. They need to perform for their professors. It's like kind of their final exam. And everyone needs an accompanist because they're playing things that have a piano part, or maybe they're playing something that was originally meant for their instrument and an orchestra. And so they'll have a pianist play the orchestral part.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Well, did you get paid for those too, for juries?
Um,
For
I
accompanying?
I did most of the time.
Wow.
We were all starving students, so sometimes they would just make me cookies, and I didn't love that so much. I was like, these cookies are great, but I would rather get money. But most of the time, they would pay you. Yeah,
Wow, that's pretty cool. You're right there.
yeah,
Wow. Wow.
yeah.
Do you play other instruments as well?
I dabble in other instruments. So with the piano, I can play the organ pretty well.
Hmm.
And then I actually in college joined a steel drum band. So I couldn't play that now, but back in the day when I was in college, I could play the quads, which is 4 different drums
Hmm.
that you
Hmm.
play, and they
Hmm.
have different. Are you familiar with those?
Yes, but only somewhat. So I am a drummer, but self-taught with a little bit
Uh-huh.
of education at university, and then a lot of education from other players and
Oh
things like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so steel drums are great. They're from Trinidad, and depending on the size of the drum, the smaller drums make the higher sounds, and then the big, huge kind of, I guess, like gas crate sort of ones make the lower sounds, the bass sounds. And so depending on the piece, you could just have one drum that has all of your notes on it, or you could have up to four, maybe some were six, I'm not sure, but they'll each of the drums will have, something like 12 different tones on it, and you'd have to change from one drum to the other. And so I was never a lead. I would always play kind of the secondary part, or I'd play the quad part, which would be four drums. Four drums would all be set up together, and then you just kind of wail away on those. It was great fun. A lot of work, but that was a lot of fun. I could not do it anymore, so don't ask me.
So the melodic part of that piano must have lent itself to the melodic part of those drums, because I played in a percussion ensemble in that was based out of Mountain View in, I guess, the early part or mid 2000s, and no steel drums though. And I mean, certainly there are some. Well, there was a bass player, a guy that played didgeridoo, and then like 7 or 8 percussionists, and that included a full drum kit and then hand drums. I know you would think it would be insanity, but we had a guy, the guy who really directed the whole thing was a Berklee School of Music graduate, so he was really good at preaching, space in the playing and alternating parts and stuff, and all these guys would. I wasn't the only self-taught musician there, but everybody had a good sense for, it just becomes a cacophony of noise if you're not like waiting your turn, so to speak. So,
that must have been so fun.
It really was. They recorded, and they tell me, it's so funny, they tell me I actually participated in the second one, but they did 2 CDs, and so I was in the band when they were sort of finishing the second one. And apparently they did invite me in, and I played something, but I was, I have no memory of actually dropping. I remember going to the studio once when they were doing it, so I must have played then, but it's just kind of funny that I don't even remember. I sound like one of those musicians who doesn't remember like their famous things or whatever, but
yeah, I'll start to run together after a while.
Yeah, I guess so. But
oh
yeah,
my goodness.
With a lot of outdoor festivals and things like that. It was fun.
Tell me that you tried that didgeridoo.
No.
Oh, they wouldn't let you touch it, huh?
I'm like, I don't even understand how to do it, but yeah, it is a really cool instrument though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very cool. I had some friends that would play it, and they would do this circular breathing as well, where you I guess you store the air in your cheeks, and then that way you can be squeezing out the air out of your cheeks while you're taking a breath in at the same time, and so you never have to stop making noise as you're taking a breath. It's like the coolest, a most amazing technique. I can't do it to save my life, but I watched them do it, and it's amazing.
Our guy did it too, and I never really asked him how he did it. But that's interesting. Yeah, so it's not really technically circular breathing, but it does come across that way, eh?
Yeah, it's really, really neat. So
wow. So are you still playing piano these days?
I do play the piano. Not as much when. So after I graduated, I was performing a lot, and but then when my daughter was born, so it was about 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an immune system disease which attacks your joints, and it took me a while to get that all taken care of, and so I had to stop playing piano for a while. Well, professionally, I had to stop for a while. Like I could still practice, and I actually used it as physical therapy to keep my joints moving, but I couldn't play to the extent that I was playing. But now, 15 years later, thanks to the miracles of modern medicine, I can still play. I still teach a little bit. Most of my work now is with Frosted Lens, as you know, helping other creators with their sound and their music as they're creating their films or their other, creative projects. So that's what my day job is, really.
So did the arthritis by chance somewhat lead you into your work with Frosted Lens?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because for the first year or so, I was just trying to get my health back in order and trying to learn this new normal, because rheumatoid arthritis is a chronic illness, and so there's no cure for it, but with certain lifestyle changes, keeping yourself really, really healthy, and with medicine, you can get it under control. But because everybody's body's different, it takes a while. It can take a few years to figure out what works best for you. So those few years, I couldn't have any like performing income. And I was teaching piano lessons on the side, which is another great way. It's like a nice constant way to bring in income as a musician. But because of my health, I couldn't have as many students because of just the amount of energy it took and just the time commitment, and because I would be having to play, because you have to play with your students and demonstrate a lot. And so I had cut back on my students a lot, and I was trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do with myself? Because this was my whole identity as a pianist, was really my identity. I'm like, oh, I'm a pianist. What ended up happening was someone I knew was starting a independent production company called RPR Studios, and they were creating a spec film. And they called me up and said, hey, I know that you like to write music. I know you like to arrange music. We have this film. We can't pay you for it because it's just our spec film, but would you be willing to write music and for it? And I was like, well, hey, I'll give that a try. I've never done anything like that, but let's give it a go. What else am I going to do? I need something to distract myself. And so I did that, and I had a blast. It was so fun to create music and to record music, and to, I taught myself how to use MIDI and to use the computer to create these sounds. And it was amazing. So fun. And I got to know them. I got to know their editors, and they really, really liked me. And I liked working with them. So I ended up coming on and being their composer in residence for there. And then their sound editor, they weren't happy with them, and their mixer, they weren't happy with them. And they said, hey, Christine, could you give this a try? Because we know, you've got a good ear. And I said, oh, well, I've never done sound mixing before, but okay, let's give it a shot. And so I kind of did some I know, right? You're laughing because you're self-taught with sound mixing too. So you know what kind of a journey that is. And so I took some classes and I read some books, and was really terrible at it at first, but I was good enough that they kept me on. And I just kind of worked my way up to being the director of music and sound there. And I did that for about 10 years. And then RPR wanted to go in sort of a different direction, and I wanted to get more into the creative direction. And so I grabbed a friend of mine that you've met Russ, and he and I said, well, we really want to do these creative projects. And so the two of us started Frosted Lens together. So long story, short story long, I suppose. That was a long way to tell you. But yeah, that's the rheumatoid arthritis was directly involved with me getting into Frosted Lens.
Wow. Well, and thanks for saying short story long, because people always say the opposite, of course, because it's popular to say when actually the opposite occurred.
Yeah.
Wow. So at the time, well, two questions. Had you done composing before this part of your career?
I had done composing, not for film, not for media, but I had, it's another part about, I think just musicians, we just love to be creative, we just love to do things. And so I would always I'd written songs, and I'd written, piano pieces, and I'd done quite a bit of arranging. And then of course in school, you have to take a lot of music theory, and you have to take orchestration, and, learning how the different instruments work together. And you take a lot of form and analysis. So you're studying a lot of scores in class. And one of my favorite classes in college was actually orchestration. And so much of that was studying how instruments work together. I think that really helped me a lot as I was trying to transfer that into more of like the digital composing sphere, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So having that background and just loving, and I just loved to create music, and I just love writing music. So it just was kind of an extension of that. And so the real trick was learning the tools and learning how to use the MIDI and how to use the computer. And then the trick was learning how to use that music that I like to write. And instead of just telling the story of whatever it was I was feeling at the time, it was helping to tell the story of what was happening on the screen. So is there some sort of emotion right here that I have to help along? Or, the director sat down with me and said, right here, I want the audience to be scared. And so it was just kind of a puzzle of creating the music that flows so it feels like all of that stuff comes naturally, that, oh yeah, that's meant to be that way. Or let's just surprise you and shock you with some loud drum sounds or something. So depending on what the story was. So
So did you, this may be why I think you mentioned to me when we first sort of connected that you enjoyed the episode that had Ryan Miller and his partner from
yes.
Guster, yeah, because they were
Yeah.
doing films going, oh, okay, makes sense now. I should have put that together anyway when I started looking at Frosted Lens and some of the work that you had done. I mean,
Yeah.
I suppose it did make sense to me in a way that you gravitated toward that episode, but now it even more so.
Yeah.
Well, lucky you that you enjoyed writing, because I think a lot of pianists, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but schooled or university or otherwise, and I suppose it's this way with all musicians. Not all of us write, and
Mhm.
so what a cool thing. Did you study composition much at school?
Um, not technically, no, not technically, no. So a lot of it came from those classes that I took. I
Mm-hmm.
would then go home and use it on whatever it was that I was working on at the time. So a lot of it was self-study. But then if I had questions, the great thing about being in a university, especially around a school of music, is that there's so many resources and you can talk to so many different people. And so back then if I had a question, I would talk to either the professors, like the composition professors, or the other composition majors.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask them questions along things like that. However, when I got out of school, I wanted to get into it more. And so there are some great composition books that you can read. And so I did a lot of self-study on that. And I'm actually I went back to school about a year and a half ago to get a master's in music technology.
Hmm.
And so I guess technically now I'm having some formal training on whatever it was that I was trying to figure out on my own.
Ah, how
So,
interesting.
mhm,
How interesting.
yeah.
And then you mentioned that you had this growing interest or emerging interest in creative projects that
Mhm.
that led you to your partner in crime at Frosted Lens. What were those creative projects, just to sort of give me and listeners an idea? And also, I'm sorry, before you answer that one, what university did you go to?
So I went to Brigham Young University
Okay.
in Provo. Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, so what were the creative projects that you were gravitating toward as you were thinking, or as Frosted Lens was sort of about to happen?
Well, one of the ones that was really fun is there is a there's a theater company up, where is it? Troy, New York, I think, that has a program called Stage to Screen. And so what they did was they connected emerging playwrights, and they would take plays, their short plays or whatever, and they would adapt it into being a short film. And I loved that because I love the theater. But then I also love the collaboration that comes from transforming something that's so intimate, like a theater production, where you are right there with the performers, and then turning that into a film where you can take that and you can add the visual and you can add the cinematography and the editing and of course the sound and the music to make it an even more immersive experience. So that's one of the projects that I really, really loved. I loved doing that. So that's kind of an example. I also love audiobooks, love podcasts, and those are all sort of things that we do. We help people create their audiobooks, we help people create their podcasts. If people have short films or even feature films and they need help with their audio, maybe their post-production audio or their music, we help them with that as well. So that's more of the creative side of things that we do.
Okay. And
Yeah.
maybe this is a good time to ask about Broken Lillies, the short film that you guys
Mm-hmm.
did, and maybe you could, educate me, or not only from the perspective of what Frosted Lens specifically did, but kind of what it looks like, I guess, in general. But what was your involvement, and also just share a little bit about the film, if you could.
Oh, sure. So Broken Lillies was actually one of those stage to screen projects. That was a short play. It was a little one act play that now I was not involved in the coordination of all of this, but my partner Russ, he was an executive producer on that, and he worked with them and he worked with the screenwriter to adapt that into a short film. And so my job with that, technically, because I'm with Frosted Lens, I'm a producer, but I didn't do much of a producer role on that. I mostly just did the sound. So I did the mixing, the post-production mixing, the Foley, and the music for that. So I worked really closely with our director that we worked with quite a bit, and RPR. We contracted her to help us with this as well. And so that was my job with that. So technically, I think I have a credit as a producer on that, but I just was more of a sound producer than anything else.
Yeah, cool. I have not seen it yet. I was looking at the streaming option on it just this morning, but anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So.
It's a very sweet and sad type of film. It's a very, very small cast. It's really about this couple who have received really terrible news, and they're trying to figure out if they're going to make it as a couple, really. And so it kind of takes you through this really interesting thing, this really interesting dynamic between this young couple of whether or not they're going to make it together or not, or are they going to kind of face this head on, or are they just going to fall apart? And so it's really interesting actually about that, about how music can change it. When I read it, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to take this music and I'm going to write this music from the perspective of the wife, because that's, of course, I was like, I identified with her, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I wrote music like that, and it showed all this anger and all this, you know, all of this stuff. And I sent it to the director, and she says, no, that's not what we're going for. We need it from a perspective of this, because I want it to be more ambiguous. And so it just kind of shows how music can really direct not only what someone's feeling, but it can direct what lens you're actually watching the film from. Are you watching it from the wife's perspective? Are you watching it from the husband's perspective? Or are you watching it from just kind of a fly on the wall perspective? And depending on what perspective you're going to do, the music's going to change.
So I'm imagining an answer to this question, but could be totally wrong. But was there a lesson that you personally took away from that experience of creating, and I don't know how far into the process you were creating, or if it was like you did the whole score, or you kind of demoing it, or whatever, whatever you call it in film, and then have the director say that's not what we're going for. Was that the first time that had happened, and did you take some things away from that? Because I'm imagining it as like boy, that was a time killer, but let me see if I can fix it. But I know nothing about what you would have invested in time. I would think it would have been a lot, but yeah, what did you take away from it, if anything?
Like, did I get angry sort of
thing? No, not really. Well, sure, if you did, yeah. I was kind of just thinking like, okay, well, I mean, if it was me, and I don't really know anything about scoring film, but if it was me and and I could see that happening to anyone, I would think, well, boy, I guess I'll really spend some time with the director up front, or whatever, whomever, to make sure I know where this should go, and then approach it that way.
Right. So I'd worked with this director quite a bit. Usually now, if I'm working with a director that I don't know as well, there are lots of questions that you want to ask for sure. So this was unique in the fact that I'd worked with this director for 10 years already, and she gave me a temp score and then said, let's just see what you can do with this. And then we'll come back together and talk with it. That's not usually what happens in film scoring. Usually you sit down and the director has hits of what they want and what mood they want. And that's when you do, yes, like you said, it's up to the composer to get as much information as possible on what mood they're going for, what the point of view is, and what sort of sound that they're going for. So yeah, this was kind of a odd man out sort of thing, where she's like, yeah, just go for it and let's see what happens.
Maybe she took a lesson away from it.
Maybe, I don't know. We've worked together since then, and we've got a good working relationship, so it wasn't a problem. And getting notes, and even when you do have a good relationship with the director and you do one of those scoring scenes, sometimes once you see a film with the music in it, you just they maybe change their mind, or, so corrections and rewrites, that's just part of the job. And so you don't really take that to heart as like, oh my goodness, I messed up. Unless you really have messed up. But you just it's just kind of part of the process and the creative process. But usually I don't have someone saying, oh no, this is the completely wrong direction. Usually they'll be like, I love this. There's just this one little spot right here. Can we change that? And then you go back and you change that. If that makes sense.
I love this, but we need the whole thing to be completely different now.
It's all just part of the process. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. And it's never really wasted time, really. Well, because you don't record until you have a total sign off on it, right? So anything that they're changing, you usually are just changing in the mock-up stage when you've made everything just on the computer, and it's very, very easy to change.
Sure.
But I would say there is wasted time if you have gotten approval and then you've gone and recorded the music, and then the director says, oh wait, no, I've changed my mind. That's when you feel like you have wasted time. But that doesn't really happen very often, because things are usually, you get the okay well before you ever start recording anything.
Yeah, I'm thinking a little bit about the conversation that with Ryan Miller and Jay Lifton, and how entertaining some of their stories were. Again, from someone, being told to someone myself, speaking of myself, that really doesn't know that much at all about the world of scoring film. But I got a kick out of some of the stories that they had, how things just sort of fell together, and sometimes these time crunches, and they're just characters on top of that. So.
Yeah, they're great. That was a great show. I loved that episode.
I'm glad. Okay, so let's talk about Musicians Against the World.
Sure.
Which is how I found you. Tell me about, its inception, the inspiration, and I'm also curious about your favorite topics of conversation that you have on there.
My goodness, yeah, because it's quite the a range of there's quite a variety of pieces. So, besides yourself, I've had lots of favorite guests and things. So I guess I'll start with how it started. I started up jogging, just as part of my trying to get healthy. And so I decided that it would be fun to start listening to podcasts. And I thought, well, let me listen to some music podcasts. And I couldn't really find exactly what it was that I was looking for. And I found some really good ones. And so I listened to those. But then I saw that there was I still had some questions. There were things that I wanted to know about musicians, and things that I wanted to know about people, how people make money. I knew how I made money as a musician, and I knew how I could make a living as a musician, but I wanted to know how other people did. And then I went down this rabbit hole thinking, I remember being in college trying to figure out, okay, I'm graduating. What do I do next? And I graduated before there were podcasts, of course, but I was just thinking, wouldn't it be amazing to have a resource that just tells the listener about these different musicians and different topics that would help people, that would help someone who, like me, when I first graduated, didn't really know where to go next. And then I thought about my professor. I had this amazing piano professor when I was in school, and, he had played at Carnegie Hall. He traveled the world, all of these things. But then when we were in our lessons, a lot of times we were just talking about the music, because I didn't even I think when you're, 18, 19 years old, you just think about yourself and you don't even really care about anybody else. But then when I was older, I was like, okay, there's so much wisdom in his experiences as a musician. And I just, for one reason or another, I didn't ask him about it. And I think had I asked him about his experiences and about his life as a musician,
like career-wise,
or just, mental health wise, how he handled his life balance, all sorts of things. If I had asked him any of those things, that would have helped me make decisions on my own for my next step, my next chapter. And especially after I was injured and after I got sick, I had to kind of rethink my career as a musician, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to play the piano anymore. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And so for my first episode, I actually called that professor and I interviewed him, and I said, tell me everything about auditions, about how you got to where you are. Tell me about how to perform. What are judges looking for? That sort of thing. And he told me his story, and I thought, this is incredible. Why did I never ask him this when I was in school? And so then I thought, well, let me figure out what other questions I have about other musicians. And so I would invite musicians on and ask them questions about themselves. And it kind of grew. And we ended up talking about all sorts of different topics. We talked about topics about teaching, topics about what it's like to live as an orchestral musician. I mean, I'm a classical musician, but I only would come into an orchestra every once in a while. Like if they had a piano part, the piano's not necessarily like an integral, always there part of an orchestra. So I would just come in for special occasions, I guess. Then I had a singer who sang on a cruise ship. Like I would never even think about that as being an actual career choice, but she did it for years and she loved it and she thought it was fantastic. So someone that video game composers, like there were all of these different careers, and it just snowballed into this amazing thing of, oh my goodness, there are so many musicians with infinite ways that they have crafted their lives. And being a musician as a professional is a very difficult thing, and you have to really be your own CEO, if you will. And you have to make these choices about being a musician and what you want to do with your life. And the more people that I interviewed, the more I realized how many opportunities there are. And so I'm really excited that I get to share that with people, and to like maybe answer some questions that they haven't learned, that they didn't learn in music school, that would help them become, really happy and successful professional musicians. So it's just grown.
So that's a wide range of careers, I guess, within music. How did you go about finding those particular guests? Or was it a little bit fortuitous that these people that you found were in all this myriad of careers, or did you sort of go career specific and start, hey, look at that, here's a video game composer that seems to be thriving? How did it work out that you found the guests that you did?
A lot of them at first were people that I knew,
Mm-hmm.
because again, as a pianist, you get to work with a wide variety of styles and genres. I was in rock bands, all of those types of things. And so I just knew a lot of different types of musicians that had really interesting stories. But then I would be sitting here and I would think, I don't know anything about this. Like maybe my kids would be playing a video game. I'm like, where did that music come from? And so I would kind of cold call some people that I thought were really interesting. And actually, one of my favorite guests was Bruce Adolph, and he was pretty early on in the show. And I used to listen to him on NPR in my commute as I was traveling to different places. And he had this great show called Piano Puzzler, and it's still on actually. And he would take like a Beatles song, or I don't know, an old standard, and he would rearrange it into the style of a different composer. So he would play Hey Jude in the style of Johann Sebastian Bach. And people would call in and they would try to guess the song and then guess the composer. And it was like, I listened to this every week when I was traveling to different places. And so I thought I would love to talk to him. And so I found his SoundCloud place, like his SoundCloud channel of all things. And I just sent him a message. I was like, would you be interested in this? And he was totally excited to come. And he talked to me, and it was one of my favorite. And he talked about composing. He talked about creativity and imagination. And it was such a delight to talk to him. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am meeting my hero right now. And he is just as lovely, just as lovely as I was hoping he would be. So
How cool.
Yeah.
How cool.
Yep. And
Wow.
so then after that, people were like, hey, this was a lot of fun. If you like interesting people, here, I have this friend or this friend or this friend. And so it kind of became a beautiful network of these amazing musicians like yourself. I had so much fun chatting with you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really cool. And it's funny, occasionally in the beginning I would have people, and I still do, but some people who've been on the podcast recommend someone. Not a lot, but what I did in the early, a few people that I knew, and then I literally had a routine of reaching out to past guests to, talk about the challenges of finding quality guests like themselves. And so if they ever had recommendations, and so that helped me grow in the beginning. But it's nice that you had almost like an opposite sort of effect, that these people were recommending folks to you. So that's very nice.
Yeah, well, I would ask them. I was like, you always send like a little email saying, "Oh, thank you so much.
Ah, okay.
Do you have someone else? Is there anyone else you think would enjoy being on the show?" So it's not like they just offered it. Don't, no, no, no. It didn't fall in my
Oh,
lap.
so you worked for it too. So
Yes, yes.
how long has the podcast been going?
Well, it started in September of 2019. However, once COVID hit, I had to take a break. I know a lot of people started podcasting during the COVID, but I couldn't because I had kids at home, and all of a sudden I became school teacher, and Frosted Lens got really busy with different things happening during COVID. So I actually had to take a break. It went for a couple of months in 2019, and then it basically started up again in 2021. So it's been a couple of years
How cool.
now. Yeah. Yeah.
And so back to Frosted Lens. So you saw during the pandemic that projects were coming in. How's it been now that we've sort of eased our way out of that? Have you seen a change or any kind of slowdown? Are you looking at different types of projects now?
Well, I would say that it is a different type of project. So we actually have two sides of Frosted Lens. We have the creative side, which we super love, with all of the audio dramas, audiobooks, and films and that sort of thing. And then on the other side, we have informational. And so that's when maybe companies or schools need some sort of videos to help tell their stories, maybe for a fundraising campaign or, things along those lines. Right. And so what we found during the pandemic is that schools needed online resources for their students. And so they called us up and we helped them edit this huge influx of everything needs to be video now. And then other schools were like, oh my goodness, our graduation can no longer be in person. We want to have it at a drive-in. So we need a video for this drive-in. And so we would, help them with that. So those sort of things don't happen anymore. We're not doing graduation drive-in films anymore.
So bizarre.
I know, isn't it? The whole thing was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's just seems like another life. But now I would say that the creative things are starting up again. So it's a little bit more, people are starting to make films again, and audiobooks and audio dramas are really taking off. We're getting way more of that now, to be honest.
So when you say audio dramas, what platforms are those coming out on?
They're coming out on, well, it depends. A lot of them are coming out on Audible. Some call it a podcast, so they're releasing on podcast, but they're audio dramas.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Are these in a category that are without a book, and it's basically like an Audible version of a podcast, like a limited series thing?
Yeah. I don't really do much of the like the promoting of it. I just let them. I just do what the creators need. So I'm not exactly sure, but I think a lot of them are on Audible. Yeah. And it's like maybe it'll be based off of a book, but like they create a script. So it's like those old radio dramas, you know what I mean? Like the old radio shows that you used to listen to, and they would have they would have actors do the parts. So yeah, it's pretty fun. I grew up listening to some old tapes of audio dramas. So it's kind of taking me back to my childhood a little bit.
Yeah. Sounds cool.
Yeah.
And I meant to ask you, when you started listening to podcasts, what was your favorite or like first favorite podcast, the one that sticks out in your memory kind of getting you hooked? I
still listen to it. It's Freakonomics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I loved that one. It was so much fun. It took me a while to find yours. I think it was hard I don't know why.
Wait, so does that mean that you had found it before I started reaching out to you?
Yeah, of course I had. Of course I had, for sure. But it took me a while. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because there's the search engine or something. I don't know, but but then once I started, after I found yours, then I was able to find some, because they always recommend stuff underneath it. And so, you have to look up, I was looking up music podcasts, and that's not what you need to look up. You need to look up musician podcasts. I'm like, oh, okay, now I can find things. It's the search engine's just nuts. I think they need to do something about that to make it a little easier to find what you're looking for. But yeah, so my first podcast was Freakonomics, and I still listen to that one. I think it's great fun. Completely.
Check back into that one. Were you a fan of the book as well? The books?
I actually didn't read the book until like last year.
Okay.
Isn't that crazy? So I found Freakonomics again because my old piano teacher, we were talking about baby names. It was the strangest things. Don't ask me why we were talking about baby names, but he said, "Oh, you need to read Freakonomics." And I hadn't read it, but then I looked it up on podcasts and it was there. And so, yeah, I don't know, it's weird, but yeah, but I read it. I read it last year or the year before, probably during COVID. And yeah, I love it. I think it's great fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So,
interesting. So, I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but it was the big drama series that NPR did. The name is eluding me. As the first podcast that I listened to, it was the True Story, True Crime. What the heck was that called? I can't remember now. It's
oh,
like one of the most famous podcasts ever, just because it brought up a lot of attention to podcast Serial. That's what it
yeah.
was called. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, that was a good one.
Serial. But
Uh-huh.
then you just start discovering so many things out there, and yeah, I think like you said, I'm sure the search engine is evolving, and then when I launched the Unstarving Musician, I would have to say it was unintentionally a pretty soft launch, so it's been a gradual
Mm-hmm.
build of both consistency and then just working little by little on the things that help you get discovered. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not shocked, but that it took you a while to find me. But
Well, you do.
I could probably say the same. And some of that for your podcast. However, some of that is like I'm guilty of not having spent a lot of time looking around
Right.
for other musician podcasts. But there's just a handful, and I'm sure you can think of them too, that have always sort of been at the top of the radar. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you're interested in the topic of musician related content, and maybe even from when you just were looking as you were about to start Musicians Against the World, like what else is out there, and those guys have just been there for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So what made you start yours?
Well, I did this little book called The Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting
Uh-huh.
Paid Gigs, and I I had this mentor, a British guy, and he's a big podcaster, and he's published some books with actual publishers, uh, and I laugh because I hear his voice, and he just tells me, "You need a podcast, Roberto." So I took his advice, and I had was already really, I mean, he could see I was really interested in podcasts, and yeah, I like talking to people, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really just, I mean, I guess to back up a little bit, it was really looking at ways to help more musicians, because the book was a really small niche world of mine,
Mm-hmm.
trying to help people that I imagined were in the exact same dilemma that I once was with, like, when I wrote it, I was at a place where I was playing pretty much as I wanted to, and getting paid,
Yeah.
having a great time and everything. But I kept seeing musicians around me, and this is when I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, who, some of whom were just didn't seem to be making it happen for themselves. So I thought, well, I'll share this story. And then, yeah, I thought, well, this podcast thing should be good for helping me share it with more people. But like yourself, you just immediately start discovering these new worlds. And for me, because I've really just been sort of this gigging, clubs, wineries, restaurants, private
Mm-hmm.
events type of musician, maybe not too unlike yourself, but then you start discovering all these people who are like songwriters, and they're playing festivals, and they're
Right.
they're touring, and just all these things I'd never done. And
Mm-hmm.
I still run into that today. I mean, here we are talking. I have talked to, I think you're the third person that I recall talking to anyway, who has done film score. This is like,
Mm-hmm.
still, it's a new topic to me, and I'm sure I mean, I think I was just confessing to you, like, I know nothing about this really, even though I've had a few conversations. So it's pretty interesting though, and I guess it's
Yeah.
when I talk to people, and I know you've experienced this. I could sense it when we spoke last time for your podcast, that you feel like this person all of a sudden, and
Mm-hmm.
you want to be friends, and you want to maintain
Right.
contact. So it's just a lot of fun. It's a great way to meet people for sure.
It really is. It
Yeah.
really is. And to learn new things. I can't believe the things. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this. Well, you just said that you don't know anything about film scoring, but there's like, you think as a musician after doing it for decades that you kind of know what it's like to be a musician. And then you talk to somebody and you think, oh my goodness, my eyes have just been opened to a completely different world that I didn't even know. I didn't even know existed. It's incredible. So much out there, so much to learn.
Oh yeah, and I'm thinking back to the outset of our conversation when we were talking about your podcast anyway, about all these different career paths. And it's kind of funny because on the Unstarving Musician, and I'm sure may have to do with the nature of musicians that I've spoken with, the types of, maybe many of them or most of them have been doing somewhat similar types of work, performing. And I was like, that's nice. It's going to be nice for people to hear that, I hope, because there's a lot of discouragement in the business of music right now. And there has been,
Yes.
I think since I started the podcast, and it continues to change. And I think that is probably part of the frustration. It's like, well, what the hell am I supposed to, where do I need to focus now? And plus there's all the shiny objects within the marketing part of it that can be very distracting. And
Yes.
so, yeah, it's nice to hear that. And I have started to see that more and more, that there are all these little areas where one can apply themselves for a career, piecing together a career, or maybe just having something very specifically niche that's all they do. That happens sometimes too.
Yeah. And I think, especially with the way things are changing with technology, you always have to be on top of things, and you have to kind of keep an ear to the road about what's happening. And then it's always just, you always are constantly adjusting to things and to life and your stage of life. And yeah, it's exciting. You never get bored.
For sure. That is true. Okay, so I've kept you quite a while here, so I guess I want to close with where Frosted Lens and or yourself, what do you see ahead for the next year or two? What are you excited about coming your way or hoping to come your way?
Well, I have to say that I kind of love where I am, but I am graduating. I'm graduating with my master's in the next couple months. So I'm very excited about that. I'm working on my capstone project. So that'll be lots of fun to be finished up with that. And I kind of I love what we're doing. We're going to keep on doing these projects. I love working with other creatives. I love creating these things and working with someone and capturing their vision of their stories and telling their stories. And when I can do that with music, or if I can do that with sound design, I think that's great. So I just kind of want to keep on keeping on, to be honest. Is that a terrible and lame answer?
No, it's exciting. It makes me smile. I'm happy for you and Russ and the people that are in your orbit at Frosted Lens. So I know people can find out about your work at frostedlens.com, including they can find out about the podcasts and the films and all those things. And I'm trying to remember how it was that I initially contacted you, but maybe you can tell people, if they want to reach you, what your preferred method of them trying to reach you for things like questions or compliments or complaints or whatever.
Like, you were too long-winded on that podcast. Well, okay. So if they're wanting to know about Frosted Lens itself, info@frostedlens.com is the best way to get in touch with us. We check that all the time. If you want to get in touch with me personally with that, you can find me at csmith@frostedlens.com. If you're interested in the podcast, Musicians versus the World, you can find us on Instagram. I think it's Musicians versus the World podcast on Instagram, and we're on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah. Or just send me an email. I'd love to chat. I love talking with people. I love meeting people. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has, or I'm happy to help with any project that they have that they feel stuck with. It brings me so much happiness to work with people.
Very good. And I believe your Insta, because I wanted to check. I'm like, I don't think that's right. It's Musicians versus the VS, the world.
Yes.
The world
versus
podcast.
The world.
I thought I heard something different. Anyway, yes. Well, Christine, thank you so much for making time. It's been a pleasure. And I will be in touch with you again very soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been such an honor to chat with you. So thank you so much.
The pleasure was mine. If you do not yet have a website for your music, check out Bandzoogle. It was created to help musicians and bands build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle features amazing design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, tickets, and more, and it provides detailed fan data. Try it free at bandzoogle.com. Use the promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. Thank you again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of The Unstarving Musician, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can leave us feedback at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. I would love to hear from you. Find links for people and things mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love. If you're interested in starting a podcast but have been procrastinating, stick around for a couple more minutes because I want to tell you about Podcast Startup. It's a program I started working on months ago but didn't quite finish. Well, I'm putting the finishing touches on it as I record this for you. If you feel you need a little help getting your podcast started, Podcast Startup is for you. It's affordable, info-packed, and ideal for new podcasters. With Podcast Startup, you'll get an amazing step-by-step guide for getting started, lots of practical tips, and direct access to me for the unexpected, the deep questions, the I need a little more help kind of stuff related to podcasting. Look, I've published, recorded, and worked on over 275 podcast episodes. I'm constantly studying to improve my own game, and I want to start helping others start and sustain their own podcasts. Did you know that most podcasts don't make it past their first few episodes? That's right. They start, they stall, and then they die. Sustaining a podcast ain't easy. It's commitment. Poor planning and poor expectations are a recipe for a fast burnout and fade out for podcasters. This is exactly the kind of thing Podcast Startup was designed to help with. If you're intrigued, if you want to start a podcast the right way, go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to sign up for the beta launch. Wait, what? Beta launch? Yep. This is all new, and for a limited time, you can get a screaming deal on Podcast Startup. It'll always be well worth the price of admission, but the screaming deal is only available for a limited time. Go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to learn more. Start your podcast the right way with Podcast Startup by me and the Unstarving Musician. All right, one more time. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.